Good evening. Welcome to Blanc Township Board of Trustees meeting for Thursday, December 12th. Ms. Lane, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we call the meeting to order, I'd like to ask for an approval of both the consent agenda and the regular agenda.
Mr. Chair, I'd be glad to approve the consent agenda and the regular agenda with one addition. The board on Tuesday night asked me, and I did contact Bethany Baptist Church, sent them the same agreement that Twin Cities Baptist has, and they said, if you need it, fine, and they gave me the pastor's name to put on the agreement, so I would like to add that in item K so that you can approve both Twin Cities and Bethany Baptist Church.
Support. Okay.
Thank you.
I don't know if we need an agenda change for this, but when we get to the discussion about the special board meeting, or the board meeting that we're going to schedule for the 20th, I want to discuss maybe adding a couple of items, but we'll talk about it going forward if we need to.
I have an item that we could add that in too.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll just bring that up under that.
Okay.
Okay. So there's been a motion. Has it been seconded?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we actually have a privileged presentation this evening, and we're very pleased to have with us Miss Linda Riles-Massey, who's one of the board chair actually for the GDL, and Mr. David Conklin, the director for the Genesee District Library also. So welcome, and excited to hear what you guys have for us.
Okay. Mr. Supervisor, Honorable Board of Trustees, good evening. On behalf of the Genesee District Library Board of Trustees, thank you for this opportunity. It is the intent of the board to issue a resolution renaming the headquarters location of the system the William F. Delaney Headquarters. While the board is vested to change the name, in the spirit of inclusion and transparency, it is important to us that we have the support of the governmental entities that form the Genesee District Library system. To that end, we solicit your feedback and support so that we can include in the resolution without objection from the governmental entities. The board has chosen this action as a testament to the vision and leadership of Mr. Delaney in establishing the GDL and his more than 40 years as a civil servant. You showed your appreciation to Mr. Delaney by honoring him at your August meeting. Historically, buildings are named after people for their generosity and contributions. We would like to do the same with Mr. Delaney to commemorate what he has done by renaming our headquarters the William F. Delaney Headquarters. Mr. Delaney, we feel, is well deserving. We are not naive and recognize that renaming the building may generate some controversy, and some people will debate whether or not the honor is merited. It is not lost on us as a board, however, that with more than 40 years as a civil servant in education and township governance, it is the reality that Mr. Delaney may have ruffled some feathers. We also know, as most of you do, that you cannot be a civil servant and not ruffle some feathers. However, ruffled feathers do not negate the contributions of Mr. Delaney. Those of us visiting the GDL are grateful for his vision, his leadership, dedication, and commitment. All of you are aware of Mr. Delaney's timeline of contributions, so I won't repeat them. However, I wish to underscore the importance of his vision and leadership in 1978. He, along with the other supervisors, Benton and Mount Morris and Davidson, understood the importance of community libraries and their future impact. A heavy manufacturing county that one day would find itself reinventing itself into a knowledge-based community, needing the resources of the Genesee District Library system. The library system that began with shelves of dusty books is now a community resource that not only provides books, but also many other forms of intellectual stimuli to the county's residents. It is for this reason and these reasons that the GDL board proposes to rename the headquarters building. We encourage your favorable feedback and support in this renaming so that we can move forward with the resolution so stating that there is no objection from the Grand Blanc Board of Trustees. We thank you for your time, and I'm open to any questions, if that is appropriate, or comments.
All I can say is, wow. That is quite a tribute.
We mean every single word of that. He has been awesome for the GDL system, and under his leadership as chair.
Well, I think anybody could only hope to have a testimonial like that, Mr. Rouse-Massey,
Thank you.
given for them, but I'd vote in favor of just for what you said. Ms. Lane?
Well, again, you don't always want to hear about history, but Bill and I were on the board that approved having that district library, and I was a charter member, and Bill did serve for many years as chairman of the GDL, so he rightfully earned that honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much for saying that.
Do any board members have any questions for Ms. Rouse-Massey
No?
or Mr. Conklin?
Well, I thank you again, and happy holidays, and I look forward to seeing all of you at the GDL Black History Brunch on February 1st at Genesis, at which time, Mr. Delaney will be given the Award of Excellence.
Very
Thank you
good.
so much.
Well, thank you very much. Ms. Lane?
Did you let,
Oh, yeah, they know that it's on the agenda.
you know it's on the agenda for action. I just didn't
Right.
want you to leave inadvertently and miss.
Right. No, we've got it coming up.
Okay.
Thank you again. And we appreciate your service on that board as well. The next item is our public comment section of our meeting, and we'd welcome anybody. Sure. Come up and just give us your name and address.
I think they're all police
Yeah,
officers.
we probably don't want to.
Undercover.
Probably don't want to put any. We don't need the address.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Tom Witt. I'm the president of the Patrolman, Detective, and Dispatchers Union. With me is Vice President Dave Clark and our alternate steward, Tim Beakey. Tonight, I would just like to thank the board members who on Tuesday night, when a railroaded motion was submitted for a bonus, for a $4,000 bonus to the trustees, I would like to thank the board members that voted no and were fiscally responsible and kept in mind what we're trying to do here at this township. My unit has worked diligently to try and help the township year in and year out in taking care of business and doing the right things for the township. And our officers go out there each and every day, as well as our township employees. The public sector, we don't get bonuses, we get a paycheck. And we just would like to thank those members that voted no on that motion that was not on the agenda. And we'd also like to thank all of you for your service to this community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Any other public comment this evening? Mr. Hurt?
Good evening, Eric, 7212 Porter Road. I usually have a whole bunch of stuff to talk about, and I did, but I figured I'm going to go to another topic. And thank this board for their services this year. You've really accomplished a lot, did a lot of things. And I can't, you should be proud of yourselves of the things you've accomplished. And I want to thank you for it. I can't thank you enough for it. Thank you, and have a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holiday.
Thank you, Mr. Hurt. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing no further comment, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the board for approval of the minutes. we'll either entertain a motion to approve all of them as a whole or individually.
I'll make the motion to approve November 12th regular meeting, November 12th executive, November 14th regular, November 14th executive, November 26th regular, and November 26th executive session.
Support.
Okay, motion and support. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda items. I know we said that I thought it was in the regular agenda, but if you'll allow me to, one of the items on the consent agenda was the board meeting for December 20th. And I know we had some discussion on Tuesday with regard to not putting in there any other business. I don't know if we want to talk about that right now, Mr. Limita, or do we want to wait?
Well,
or
I took, when you guys made a mention of that meeting in the consent agenda, I sort of took it that you were going to flip it over to the regular agenda for discussion.
Okay.
It just didn't find a place.
Okay.
That was my
All right.
assumption.
Let's do that then. So let's put it on last for. We'll make it item R. Let's discuss that board meeting. Okay. So under operational issues, well, I don't want to skip the public hearing. So we have a public hearing right now for the proposed general fund, special revenue funds, and the Department of Public Works budgets for 2020. The property tax millage rates to support the proposed budgets will be a subject of this hearing. Mr. Laddie or Mr. Limita?
So at this point, the information's been out and posted. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on both the millage rates and anything in the general fund, special revenue funds, or enterprise funds budgets for 2020. Open the public hearing. Make sure that we recorded the names and address of anybody who wishes to speak, and then go from there.
Any comments before we open it to the public? Okay, we will open the floor for public comment with regard to the proposed general fund, special revenue funds, Department of Public Works budget for 2020, and property tax millage rates. Anybody like to comment? Anybody like to comment? Seeing no comments, we will close public comment and bring it back here to the board. We would take action later on this, so no action is needed right now. Under operational issues, item A, the board will consider a motion to support the renaming of the GDL's headquarter branch.
Mr. Chair, I would be glad to make the motion that we approve the request and the information from the Genesee District Library for the renaming of the headquarters to Mr. Delaney.
Support.
Okay, there's motion support. Any discussion? I think it's great, and all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we look forward to congratulating Mr. Delaney. Ms. Massey?
Mr. Supervisor, if I may, we'd like to show you a rough draft of what we have proposed.
Oh, great. Sure. You can pass it, give it to Mr.
Give it to
Mansour.
Mr.
You can pass it down as they look at it. Thank you, Ms. Massey. Well, congratulations, and please thank Mr. Delaney until we see him in February. Item B, the board will consider a motion to approve the 2020 budget adjustments since September 1st, 2019. We discussed this on Tuesday.
I so move.
Okay, there's a motion. Support?
Is that Mr. Thomas that supported the motion?
Was it Mr. Thomas that supported?
I did.
No, Mr.
Thank you.
Atkins. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item C, the board will consider a resolution to approve the 2020 general fund budget.
I so move.
Support.
Any discussion? It's a resolution, so seeing no discussion, Ms. Lane?
Mr. Mansour?
I'm sorry.
One point here, and I guess I'd just like to make this point because
You know, we kind of get lost in the pages and pages and pages of these budgets, both the revenue and the expenditures. But to kind of clarify and to kind of sum it all up, this budget, and you have this, you know, Mr. Supervisor or Superintendent maybe had modify this a little, but basically is a carryover budget from 2019, with the exception of some kind of, I'll say, inflation-type labor cost adjustments, benefit adjustments, and then, of course, the inclusion of the revenues and expenses related to the recent fire and police millages. And then, other than that, there's some contingency funds built into this. That's really the first time we've done this, at least in the last 4 or 5 years. But other than that, the budget's pretty much kind of a year-over-year, you know, just an incremental year-over-year change.
Any other comment? So, Ms. Lane?
Mr. Mansour?
Yep.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mr. Chair.
Yes. Item D, the board will consider a resolution to approve the 2020 Special Revenue Funds budget.
I so move.
Okay, Mr. Massey made the
Support.
motion. Ms. Lane, any discussion? Okay, Ms. Lane?
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Myself, Mr. Bennett.
Yes. Item E, the board will consider a motion to approve the 2020 DPW budget.
I so move.
Support.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item F, the board will consider a resolution to amend the 2019 general fund budget.
I so move.
Support.
Okay, motion supported.
That was Mr. Atkins again?
Yes,
Thank you.
Mr. Massey. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, Ms. Lane?
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mr. Chair.
Yes. Item G, the board will consider a resolution to amend the 2019 Special Revenue Fund budget.
I so move.
Support.
Motion support, any discussion? Ms. Lane?
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mr. Chair.
Yes. Item I, the board will consider a resolution to approve the utilization of privately owned... Yeah, I just did it. Yeah, we did it. You missing one?
Special. I took it as special.
Okay. Well, just in case we didn't cover it, the board will consider a motion to amend the 2019 DPW budget.
I so move.
Support.
Mr. Chair,
Any discussion? Yes.
it's just for the board, this was my request to do that transfer of the $1.6 million of the DPW fund balance towards their obligations for OPEB.
Bring us closer to the 40% mark.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
may I insert a comment for you, please?
Sure.
You may want to tell the audience why we are moving so rapidly, because we were
Okay.
here till about 11:15
Yeah, we were
Tuesday.
here late on Tuesday. For the public's benefit, Mr. Massey brought up a good point that we've covered these pretty thoroughly, these budget items, over the past several months when we first started working on this. So all of these we've gone over. So tonight's kind of the culmination of that work and that discussion. So Tuesday we had some final discussions on these items. So we're well aware of what's in these things. However, as Mr. Lehman brought up, one of the more recent changes that we discussed on Tuesday, really the only recent change, was to amend the 2019 Department of Public Works budget. And what that amendment does is take $1.6 million from the DPW fund and put it towards our post-retirement benefits. We're trying to get closer to the 40% funded mark. The state is requiring us to file an action plan, and this will help us to sit a little bit better with the state. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item I, the board will consider a resolution to approve the utilization of privately owned locations for township functions. Mr. Lady?
We discussed this on Tuesday. I forwarded a copy of this to the board by email, and it's very brief, so I'll just read it. It's a resolution utilizing private property for township functions. Whereas from time to time, the Charter Township of Grand Blanc utilizes privately owned locations for township functions. And whereas the township desires to establish consistent terms of use for privately owned locations, be it hereby resolved that prior to the Charter Township of Grand Blanc utilizing private property for township functions, a written agreement specifying the terms of use shall be executed.
That is a motion and a second already, so. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Or this is a resolution. So Ms.
Mr.
Lane?
Mansour?
Yep.
Mr.
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Myself, yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Item J, the board will consider a resolution to approve the changing of precinct locations. And we'll,
That's so move.
Ms. Lane, did you want?
For the public's information, we have used historically McGrath Elementary School for 2 precincts. It's become extremely crowded and disturbing, I think, to the voters. And because we're anticipating more people voting absentee ballot, we're going to utilize this auditorium for one of our AV counting boards, which has to be sequestered for the entire day because we have taken on the fire department and lost additional space here. So both of those precincts, 2 and 11, 11 is over on what we call the presidential streets, and precinct 11 is all the streets between Jordan Highway and South Saginaw, north of the Township Hall to Maple Road. We'll be going next door. Not a big move for anybody, but the pastor and congregation were willing to accommodate us, and by state law, we have to take this action before we have those elections next year.
Okay, so there's been a motion, it's been seconded. Any further discussion? Ms. Lane?
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mr. Chair.
Yes. Item K, the board will consider a motion to approve the agreement with Twin Cities Baptist Church to use their facility as a precinct location. Twin Cities Baptist Church and Bethany Baptist to use their facility as a precinct location. My only concern is that we need to make sure that we publicize this very well and identify anybody whose their precinct is moving so they know where exactly they're going.
We absolutely will. I want to be the first clerk in the nation to have 100% everybody voting. That's my goal.
I wish you well, and I hope so too.
Mr. Chair.
Mr.
I
Massey.
have a question. During the discussion on Tuesday night, you know, we mentioned about the schools. Where does that fit into this, attorney?
Yeah, we just adopted a resolution that talks about privately owned property, and we talked about the schools and the fact that some of the school facilities are used for voting locations, and we talked about the fact that those are government entities. And so what I'd like to do in the future is have a discussion with the schools if they'd like an agreement similar to what we just did with Bethany or not, but we want to approach them with we want to make sure that it's mutually beneficial for them as well. And so I think that that's probably the second step in our process.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item L, the board will consider a motion to award a 5-year contract to Granite Inliner, Inc. for trenchless sewer rehabilitation activities and authorize Township Superintendent to negotiate and execute all related contracts and documents. We discussed this at length on Tuesday. The company's name has changed from Liquiforce, and they've been our contracted company for quite a few years, and we want to continue with them. And we're using a bid that was, I believe, Dearborn used.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Support.
Okay. Motion support. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
for the public, can you
Yes.
take a little deeper dive into what this
I'll
really
try.
means?
One of the things that we're trying to do is to eliminate, it's called I&I, and Dennis, you can help me, but basically the bottom line is that infiltration into our sewer system costs us money, because basically we're paying for whatever the flow meters show is exiting the township. So what we're attempting to do with lining these sewers and continually televising them, grouting the joints, is to prevent inflow into our sewer system. It helps maintain it so that we don't end up with sinkholes like we've seen in other communities with sewers that cave in. We've been doing this for a number of years, and we're going through it for, I believe Mr. Sears said, for the third time completely. But this company has done a great job. I'd like to actually see how they do it, but somehow they're able to line the inside of the sewers and help us to get another quite a few years out of our sewer system. Mr.
It
Lehman?
does a couple things. It adds to life our system by doing what we're doing, and not everybody does the aggressive maintenance plan that we do. It helps us, number one, in making sure the I&I, the infiltration and inflow of water, because these are metered, and so we pay the county for everything that goes through there. It's what we're trying to do is eliminate and not only extend the life of our system by 50 years over what it would last without doing this, but it prevents that flow from coming in through cracks in it, through grout joints. So they actually go in, they televise everything, and they seal those grout joints that could have come loose underground and where water can get through. So it's pretty amazing. And like I said, most people, most municipalities are not as aggressive as we are. It also helps us in our asset management program that we are required by the federal government to use, and that was relatively new in the last few years. We're very aggressive on completing our asset management program. In fact, we're light years ahead of most municipalities again, and that allows us to qualify for low interest rate funding and grants through the federal government.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? I think we're looking for a motion still on this.
No, sir.
Oh, do we have one?
Oh,
Okay.
no, we just, on the granite, I made the motion.
Okay.
Mr. Massey supported it.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item M, the board will consider a motion to approve the on-base annual renewal maintenance agreement through AM Data Services for the GIS department for $19,302.25. Mr. Lehman?
Yeah, we talked about this quite a bit on Tuesday, but what it really does is this is just a licensing agreement and maintenance renewal for 1 year for the 2020 year for that on-base document management system and plan review solutions. Again, this is a lot of everything we do with on-base in the way that it interfaces with our other software programs. We'd be lost without it. I mean, it really is just a maintenance renewal. We've done it every year, and the price is really not that much different from the prior year.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we got a motion.
Support.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item N, the board will consider a motion to contract with Applied Imaging Graphic Sciences to perform the back file conversion of the building department's paper files to electronic files for $82,337.35. And we had a discussion on this Tuesday, and we have representatives from Applied Imaging Graphic Sciences here if anybody has any additional questions. But our goal is to get our building documents online. I believe also we're working on separately to get to be able to allow developers to send us those files electronically, and also to be able to access them, allow our fire department, our police, what have you, that on a moment's notice they can access the plans for any of our buildings in the township. But more than anything, we're saving some money on storage space by not having to add on to this building to create accessible files. Mr. Lehman?
Again, this one, $82,000 sounds like a lot of money, But if I showed you the amount of files that we're talking about, it's a truckload. These guys have their work cut out for them, and they came in and physically verified the files so that they could give us a bid that would reflect the amount of work that's in there. The great thing for us, if we try to do it ourselves, it would probably be a 2-year process with an intern in a back room somewhere. We don't even know the accuracy of the data. With these guys, we can hold them accountable. It's gone for about a month, and they bring our original files back, and we've got everything accessed at that time. Anyone can access those files at their workstation.
Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, question for the superintendent. If you had to estimate, how many files you think that there are?
It was in the over a million.
And some of them are blueprints and some of them are index cards, right? Some of them are stapled together, some of them are...
Very labor intensive.
We had to create a lot of templates too, so when they scan, so that we create a certain template so they know what they're going to scan, then it scans in, it looks for those fields that we've put in there, it picks it up and it knows how to save it, whether it's by property ID, address, site plan review number, all of those. We can access it any number of different ways depending on who's accessing the data.
Okay. All right, so we're looking for a motion. And
So
support.
moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion, support. Any further discussion?
I just want to make
Yes.
one quick comment. So by contracting with this company who does this basically for a living, we can ensure both that all the documents get in and that they have the proper resolution and quality so that we'll be able to access them.
Correct.
So million and a half documents for that. Okay, thanks.
Okay, there's a motion, a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item O, the board will discuss the memorandum of understanding for parks and recreation operations. I believe Mr. Laddie had some conversation, so.
I did, and so I want to give you just a brief update on some feedback that we got from the city regarding the MOU that we forwarded to them for consideration at their meeting last night. And there was one of the things I was concerned about as I was able to observe their discussion was there's a lot of misinformation. And I want to take a little bit of time to go through the misinformation that they heard last night, just so that at least we can be clear, and anybody who cares to watch this video or read our minutes can know that there were many important points that were misstated last night. First of all, it was stated that the township unilaterally gave them notice that we wanted to terminate the agreement that's existed since the 70s between the schools and the city and the township, and that is absolutely not true. What we did was, in building concern for premises liability issues, accounting issues, and employment issues, is we implored the city and the schools to join us in rewriting that joint agreement, because we felt that those issues were becoming detrimental to all of our municipalities from a liability standpoint, because as it currently stands, they are not a standalone municipal entity, so to speak. They're a partnership of the schools and the city and township, and so we're all exposed on equal levels. And so what we did was, in January of last year, we adopted a resolution that urged them really, to engage us in a mutual proposed amendment to the 1970s resolution to clear up some of these liability issues. At no time did we give them notice that we're going to dissolve the Parks and Rec Commission. At no time since then have we given them notice that we intend to dissolve the Parks and Rec Commission. We've been talking with them now for coming up on a year about an amicable amendment that resolves outstanding liability issues. And so I want to make sure that everybody understands that we did not send them a notice that we're terminating our participation in that agreement.
Mr. Laddie, may I just add?
Sure.
I don't know the specific date that you and I met with Attorney Griffin and the mayor and Mr. Garner and Mr. Chisholm, the attorney for the school district, but actually I believe that was one of the first things we discussed on the agenda, was that they asked that question and we said positively we are not here to end that agreement.
You're exactly right, and that date was November 25th of this year when we sat down, and really we introduced a lot of the terms of the MOU at that meeting with them. And we had a pretty productive discussion at that meeting, and that the result of that discussion was the basis for this proposed MOU that we sent them. The other issue that they heard last night was that that determination causes a new agreement to be in place by January 20th, 2020. And by termination, I don't really know what they mean by termination, because there is a determination. What we say in the MOU is, and by the way, the purpose of this MOU, and it's hard to say for me, Memorandum of Understanding, is really to set an operational guideline until a joint resolution can be amended and adopted by both municipalities. This is not the be-all, end-all agreement. This is a stopgap measure, very similar to the stopgap measure you're going to see regarding the Fire Commission, that locks terms in place so that operations can continue until all of the details and all the discussions that go into amending that joint resolution can be accomplished. This document is meant to be considered on a high level and allowed a maximum amount of flexibility for a transition. And it does not have a January 1st deadline necessarily. That was our goal, for us to have physical control of Creasy Park by January 1st and to have programming for Creasy Park and the schools in place by January 1st. We believe that's the best outcome for the people of Grand Blanc. Because it allows us to spring into action regarding the physical condition of Creasy Park, but also to begin to onboard all of the programming responsibilities so that there are no gaps or losses or a diminished capacity for programming. It appears, based on last night's discussion at the city, that we're not going to meet that deadline. For a number of reasons, but the point of this memorandum of understanding was not to try to take 45 years of inattention and solve it in 45 days. It was to put something in place so that the parties could move forward and take the time to carefully craft an amendment. And again, I want to stress that it's an amendment to an existing agreement that we're all three parties to. There was discussion about the fact that I think one of the city commissioners said they received it an hour before the meeting last night. Mr. Griffin said he received it the day of the meeting, but that's not the case. We had inserted an estimated number for the city to pay as a contribution to really be held in escrow for the first year of operation, so we could determine the actual planning costs and actual percentage of city residents that participate in planning, with two important points at the end. First of all, that we would go through and we would have those hard numbers to determine exactly what their contribution share should be. And number two, and most importantly, there's a safety valve built in there that Mr. Griffin suggested, that if we can't agree on what those numbers are or should be, that we'll have an arbitrator come in and tell us what those numbers are so that we can lock down their contribution with certainty. What we said to them was, why don't we continue to make the same contribution that we've made in the past, with the understanding that if it's too much money, then you're going to get the amount of money back that you overpaid, but also the understanding that it's not enough, that we'll have to reconcile that. And so we put that dollar amount in, and we put in the arbitration clause that Mr. Griffin had asked for, and that was all. That was the only thing that changed from the time that Mr. Griffin and Mr. Chisholm received that proposed MOU a week ago tomorrow, so the preceding Friday. And again, as Mr. Bennett points out, these are all essentially the same terms that we had been talking about since November 25th. So the idea that they've received this information recently, do you have a question, Trustee Thomas?
Yeah, so the MOU, if I understand this correctly, and I'm pretty sure I am, so we give them a dollar amount, and if the participation's greater, they pay us at the end of the year greater. If it's lesser, then we would pay them less.
Exactly.
It seems like that $120,000, even though that was a contribution for years and years, it seems like that was a sticking point when I watched the meeting. So would it be appropriate to drop that $120,000 figure down to $50,000, David? I'm Attorney Laddie.
It could be 50. It could be any number you pick, for the reason that I just explained, that at the end of operation after 1 year, there's either going to be money owed or money paid back. And so if it's 50 and it turned out to be the cost was 35, then they're going to get 15 back. If you made it even less than that.
What number do you think that they would feel comfortable with, Attorney Laddie?
Well, one of the discussions that I had with Attorney Griffin was that they felt, and I want to make sure I've got this right, that
11%.
Yeah, and they felt that they had essentially 11% participation of city residents in our programs. I don't know how they arrived at that, because beginning in 2020, we're going to specifically find out where people live who are participating in the program, not just by zip code and not just by street address. So I guess if you felt that maybe programming costs, and I'm going to take a wild guess, but let's say they're $200,000, 11% would be $22,000. Something, I mean, that's what they were asking, they were saying, we represent about 11% of programming.
Well, I do agree that they need to have skin in the game and, a good faith dollar amount. Through you, Supervisor Bennett, to Superintendent Limita, what is your suggestion on the dollar amount?
I think that no matter what method you try to arrive at, we're not going to know, because we don't have concrete numbers on that.
Absolutely.
So to me, initially they were suggesting last year at one time, or at least through their attorney, they had made the suggestion that they cut their contribution in half from 120 to 60, and that was before even this conversation. If they were comfortable with that $60,000 number, great. We're going to work it out at the end of the year. That $60,000 in advance or in arrears doesn't really make that much difference, as long as we've agreed to working through a better methodology of keeping the metrics on who participates in what programs. And I think we have that under control.
Do you think that if we asked for $30,000, that would show half of what they think? Offer them $30,000, and that would show a good faith that we still want them as a good partner?
I think it would.
You think that would be a good faith?
I do.
Would it be legal to make a motion to that aspect, Attorney Laddie?
No, but I want you to do this. I want you to keep that in mind. I do want to run through a couple more points. So I need you guys to discuss dollar amounts when I get done with this. But I think this. We sent them a proposal. They said we don't like it. The end result of the discussions that Mr. Griffin had to do with money, and it was their uncertainty of what they're going to get for their money, and it's their uncertainty and our uncertainty in what programming costs and what their participation will be. That's fine. What I don't like to do, and I've been in this business a while, is I don't like to bid against myself. Number one, and we didn't get a counter proposal from them. They just said we don't like it and we have to think about it some more. Actually, what they said wasn't. Ms. Jean Burr said that Mr. Griffin needs more time to consider it. So whatever that means. But I think what we want to do in the interest of time, because again, as we dither on about this, we're losing the opportunity to get the programming framework in place and to actually start programming. And so what I want you to do when we're done with this discussion is give me a number that will be your last best offer. even though this is an awkward process. But understand this, the framework of this agreement is that whatever that programming costs and whatever percentage they participate in it, they're going to be paying that amount at the end of the year. And we'll be able to prove it to them with figures. Our books will be open. We will either they will pay the correct amount, they will have to make up any deficiency, or we'll give them back any extra amount. So with that in mind, I just want to move to a couple more points because they were fairly important points. When you say something like that, you got to follow up with it. Pretty important. But what happened with, this is interesting because I'm trying to be, and I know we're trying to do this. We're trying to be very matter of fact, and we're trying to follow down the line, and it gets me frustrated when what we've been asking them to do for a long time and what we've been trying to do, the message is lost. And so I want to make sure that at least we have put on record what our thoughts were. And another big important point that they said last night was, as of January 1st, the employees of the Parks and Rec Commission will be our employees. I don't know what the basis for that statement is, because that's absolutely not true. The Parks and Rec employees are employees of the Parks and Rec Commission. One of the problems that we have is that we don't feel that they've got the tools necessary to administer that responsibility. But in no way are we going to have Parks and Rec employees be our employees as of January 1st unless we have the MOU in place. If they agree to it, then yes. If they don't agree to it, then no.
I believe that was also discussed. But
it was. None of this, and again, none of this is new information. These are concepts that we have discussed and that were amenable. And in fact, to their credit, one of the themes running through the discussion of the MOU is probably this stuff's all a really good idea. It's just come at us quickly, which is false, and it comes with a price tag that we can't digest and don't understand, which is something that we're going to need to address. So I think I was glad to hear that. I was glad to hear that it was coming down to a matter of money for them, because we put a lot of careful thought into how can we bring this on board, how can we make it more efficient, and most importantly, how can we make it better. And I think what we should do is amend our MOU if you're so inclined, and perhaps alleviate their concerns about their upfront contribution, and see if we can't get them back to the bargaining table. And also, if they do nothing, this is an interesting thing, if they don't do anything, then they're going to owe a $110,000 contribution very shortly. It may not be January 1st, but in all respects, this is going to turn out to be cheaper for them than their current status quo situation. So, will you have any questions for me? I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, let's have a discussion about how we
Mr. Massey. Okay, Mr. Massey had his hand up.
I have basically a comment and to move the process forward. And my thinking is, I have great confidence in Attorney Griffin, and I have great confidence in Attorney Laddie. What I would like to see Attorney Laddie and Attorney Griffin work out that dollar amount, whatever that comes out to be, and you two agree. That's what I would like to say. I mean, that's what I would like to see.
So you would give me authority up to a certain amount, or just try to come to a mutual agreement with Griffin and bring it back to you?
I would like for you, let me put it like this. Let me say it another way. When you come back, I would like for you to present the agreement.
Okay.
Okay?
I will certainly do that.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I'm thinking.
Now and again, if the comments if the discussion they were having last night is true, that this is really about their contribution, how much that will be, then I think that'll be relatively easy. Because again, I have confidence in this process that we're going to set up. That assumes that they also will have some level of confidence, or the price tag will be in such amount that they're not that concerned about it, frankly.
Let me make my last comment, attorney, as a street lawyer. Here's what we've gotten ourselves into, whether we agree or disagree. It's a cat and mouse game. So I can assure you, if we put a number on it tonight, they're not going to agree to that number.
Yeah,
100%.
I hesitate on putting the number on it. I'd
100%.
rather leave it between the attorneys. But what I would like to clarify, and I think we ran into this with the fire. We had you know, the cost analysis done, and it seems as though the formula for how we calculate cost was an issue there. That when we got into the what do we call it? The costs that aren't necessarily
Indirect costs.
the indirect costs. It seemed like that was where the stumbling block was. I'm not sure, you know. Really, I'd entertain listening what the board's suggestions are on the dollar amount that we settle on. But I think, you know, what we're talking about is at the end of the year saying how do we settle up, and that formula I think is where could be a sticking point, because they don't want to agree to something that you know, hey, we didn't, you know, we said we'd give you 30,000 as Mr. Massey or I don't know Mr. Thomas said, but then at the end of the year the formula, you know.
So here's the solution. An arbitrator is chosen. Walt and I go in, we make our arguments, and the arbitrator picks some amounts.
Okay.
And it's done. And we live by that.
Mm-hmm. I'm good with that.
Supervisor
Mr.
Bennett, if we agree to that, does it mean actually anything? I mean, because it's still caught in the game between you talk with Mr. Griffin talks with the city, and they, you know, what difference does this make?
Well, it ends at the arbitrator, right?
If they agree on this amount for right now at the arbitrator.
If they, well, okay, well, it's conceivable they could agree. Let's take the hypothetical $60,000, and they agree to it, and it comes out that it's $120,000, and they say no way, we don't agree with that, and we say look at all the here's all the data we gathered, here's our books, here's what we attributed for all of our efforts for programming. And they say we don't believe you. We don't think those figures are accurate, or we think you attributed too much, and so we don't agree. And so Griffin and I now have to go in front of an arbitrator. We have to spend an afternoon, and I have to show the arbitrator that these are the expenses that it actually costs, that the indirect costs are legitimate, and that here's what it costs per city resident. And he'll say either he'll be persuaded, either he'll fight in my favor, Walt's favor, or he'll cut it in half. But either way, it's got an ending to it. Right?
I'm good with that. Mr. Thomas?
So, getting back to the MOU, what do you think Mr. Griffin would agree to, Attorney Laddie? Which way would you prefer to go?
Giving you latitude or giving you a solid
Giving
number?
you a dollar, right, give you a dollar amount or latitude?
Why don't you do this? Why don't you give me the latitude to talk with him, and why don't you be thinking about a dollar amount, right? And so and let me communicate with Mr. Griffin, and let me communicate with you on an individual basis. We're not going to necessarily make a decision, but I may just be looking for direction from you on a range, and let's let that happen in the very near future. And I say near future because I know that we're going to have a meeting, I think December 20th, but we've got a limited agenda, and I don't know if the city's going to meet before the end of the year. And so I'm not exactly sure when I'll be able to come back to you on a formal basis and lock this up. But also I'll tell you this, if it's possible to do this and we can have a special meeting of at least 4 members, then I would suggest that. Because again, and I know you all feel this, it can't be done soon enough. Every day we waste is going to cost us 2 days in the spring. And so why don't you do this? Why don't you let me go back to Mr. Griffin and have a discussion, and then I'll communicate with you. And I hope by some miracle that I'm asking you to have a special meeting just to consider this and to sign this MOU. Does that sound doable?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Does anybody have any questions about where we're headed or?
Ms. Lane?
Attorney Laddie, when I was listening to the tape, my sense and what I heard, and maybe these need to be clarified, that they will be handled after the memo of agreement, of understanding, and that was how many people are going to be on the Parks and Rec Commission, how is that representation going to be, what's going to happen to the employees that are over on Grand Blanc Road on January 1st. Possibly, if we could explain that those things don't get handled right away, or if we had an explanation on how those would be.
We covered those at length with all the parties when we met in November,
Yep.
Mr. Laddie and myself, in detail on how all those would work.
Well, again, conversations don't always.
Ask me one at a time, and I'll tell you. As far as the employees go, first of all, if we don't have an MOU in place, then everybody carries on January 1st just like they always have. If we have an MOU in place, then I imagine we're going to need it. We're going to need people to stay in their to man their posts at Parks and Rec, both at the commission and also in the employee category, until we can actually determine what we need and how we need it and how we're going to go about hiring those people. But those people will become township employees exclusively, and they'll become a part of a Parks and Rec department in Grand Blanc Township, whoever gets hired. I don't know who's going to come on board. I don't know who's going to stay. I don't know any of that.
In terms of the commission, what we talked about with the group of the schools and the city was that we had proposed 2 members from each entity. They have to be not elected officials representing that particular group. Actually, I'm not sure if it was the city or the school suggested having a 7th member that would be voted on by that group at large, be voted on by the representatives of the school, the city, and the township. They would elect a 7th person.
And their purpose would be to advise regarding programming, advise. And one of the things that the city kept saying is, well, they're not going to have any authority. Well, they're not going to have authority over the programming except to advise us, to provide suggestions, to provide better ways to do things, to discuss programming with, but they're not going to have decisions as far as hiring, firing, what programs go and what programs don't go.
Mm-hmm. Anything else, Ms. Lane, that you were asking?
No, the current Parks and Rec, again, is an odd number, and that is one individual selected at large, so,
right,
by the group.
So we talked about it at length with them.
I felt that hesitation and lack of understanding when I was listening.
Yeah. Well, may have been some of their board members hadn't heard what we had talked about, but okay. So I guess Mr. Laddie, as far as the memorandum of understanding with the Parks and Recreation, we're going to give you some latitude.
You'll hear back from me.
Okay. Let's hope it's soon, right?
Yes.
Okay, item P, the board will consider a motion to approve the proposed job description for Parks and Recreation Director. We altered that. I'm sorry?
So move.
Support. Okay. Motion support. Any discussion? I know we're getting an opinion from Mr. Laddie. I've also contacted our labor attorney to ask him the opinion about the hiring policy and how that affects it.
Well, so the job description we have does not have a reference to a direct supervisor at this point.
Right.
And so you could move forward on that item without having that question answered.
Right, exactly. So there's been a motion support. Any further discussion?
Just one item here. I mean, I guess I'm prepared to make a motion regarding the board subcommittee to deal with the Parks and Rec, if that would somehow aid in this whole situation at this point, or if not, then maybe the motion can be delayed. I don't know if it supports what's going on here.
Well, so I think you do have, again, you got a motion on the floor to adopt the proposed job description. I think that based on a consensus and based on your discussion on Tuesday night, you have formulated this commission this committee that's going to work with Superintendent Limita in the very early stages of this process. And so I don't necessarily think you need to formalize that now unless anybody else feels the need to do that.
I'm good with forming a committee. I mean,
I think so.
yeah.
Yeah, so let me, can I guess add an amendment to this?
Sure.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is, all right, so I'd like to add to this motion that we're going to form a 3-member board subcommittee consisting of myself, Trustees Thomas and Adkins, to formulate, launch, and transition the township's new parks and recreation activity.
Support.
I'd like to keep it a little bit looser. I don't know. Number one, as supervisor, I'm a member of all committees, so. But I would like to. I'm not sure about the specific charges of it. I don't know, Mr. Laddie, your thoughts?
I don't. Again, based on our discussion Tuesday night, I think that there was a consensus on how to move forward. Although, I mean, this formalizes it for sure, but I'm not necessarily sure you need to take that step now. But again, it's up to you guys.
I'd be willing to form a committee to talk about Parks and Rec but I believe it's going to need to come back to this board for any approval.
Well, and the other thing is, this committee, it doesn't have the authority of the board. It doesn't. So any major decisions have to be made by the township board.
Right. That's what I'm going to make sure that we're not surrendering with that.
That's on all committees.
So that's a great point. So there are ways to delegate responsibilities, and you're not delegating. We're not
supporting our.
You're not delegating the spending of money. You're
Right.
just.
So they're going to be making recommendations to the board.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get in the middle of the motion here because I don't think it's necessarily proper, but I mean, this subcommittee is going to be a conduit of board input into the process, work closely with the superintendent, periodically report to the board, and then disband upon transition of a functional P&R activity. And that's the whole kind of rest of the story.
What was the last part? Disband when, Mr. Mansfield?
Disband upon transition of a fully functional P&R activity.
I don't see any problem.
We can.
So,
Call for the motion.
was there a second on that, Ms. Lane?
Yes, Mr. Atkins.
I second it.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Now you have to go back to the original motion that's been amended.
I thought we were
I
voting.
thought it was an amendment to the original motion.
Mr. Mansour
Okay.
and Mr. Atkins made an amendment to the original motion, which we just adopted unanimously. Now we have to go back to the original motion.
They added on to it.
Yeah, we added on to it.
Right.
And that,
So
they
they
accepted it, so.
They adopted the job description and then also
Okay.
the definition
I
of the
thought they
committee.
were amending it, but,
No,
all right.
so we're good on
Whatever way
that.
you want to do it.
Next item, Q, the board will consider a motion to authorize the supervisor's signature on the memorandum of understanding for the fire department.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Laddie, any?
No, I'll be so glad to have this adopted.
It's going to be this?
Okay. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Last item on the agenda here, under operational issues, we had approved a board meeting for the 20th of December to pay some bills, and we were discussing whether or not we wanted to add and any other business or just keep it to paying the bills. But there's been a couple items that came up that may save the township some money if we address them on the 20th. Mr. Limata, would you like to bring that issue forward?
Thank you. First off, I met with Bob Bucko, who is our insurance agent for our property and casualty coverage through HCC Tokyo Marine or the PAR plan. And one of the things that I'd asked him to look at this year, we've got the renewal, which came in in the budgeted amount, $117,000 for the year. That included the addition of cybersecurity coverage, which is new to us this year, which is great. You each got one of these, and that explains all of our coverages. I would just highlight the fact that when you get a chance to look through it, read through the cyber liability coverage, because that's new to us, and I think it's, you've seen it in the news where people have been in trouble, ransomware, those kind of things. We, theoretically thought we had coverage, but at least now we know that we've got a separate cyber liability policy that will cover us. The second thing is new this year, and that has to do with the Grand Blanc Fire Department, the Township Fire Department being incorporated in. Because the Fire Commission was still intact until we get through this dissolution process, they were covering through VFIS, was the name of the insurance company that was covering it. Their policy premium was about $50,000 for the year. I had Bob Bucko Stevenson Company bid us for the exact same coverage for bringing everything in-house to the Grand Blanc Township, and it came in about $18,000. Because they were spending about $50,000 and their policy went through May, we can send a notice that we have coverage as of 1/1 if the board wants to consider it, and we probably get about $20,000 back from canceling the VFIS policy back to the Fire Commission to go into their proceeds that will split, which really pretty much covers us for the entire calendar year for this insurance. I'm not asking you to make a decision now, I want you to have time to review it, but if that could be added to the meeting of 12/20 so you guys have a chance to look at it, that would be great.
Mr. Thomas?
I'm comfortable with your recommendation. I'd like to approve this now and keep the agenda to paying the bills.
Support.
Mr. Chair.
Okay,
Mr.
but I got a
Massey?
couple other items.
Okay, Mr. Massey?
Question.
Let's do one at a time.
Yeah, question to the superintendent.
Yeah.
Quote that estimated saving again.
So it was about $50,000 that they were paying through VFIS as a standalone through the Fire Commission. Our coverage, adding it into our current coverage, is about just under $18,000 for the year.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Bennett I'd like to make a motion that we approve the new insurance contract.
Support.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? What else, Mr. Lehman?
So another item that didn't have time to get on this agenda was
That raise that you wanted.
was also Grand Blanc Township Fire Department related. They need to purchase, and we do have it budgeted in the 2019 capital expenditure budget. It exceeded my spending authority, $12,162.20. It's to replace their protective clothing. And again, NFPA standards, they expire, so we've got some clothes that are going to expire after 10 years. You can't use them anymore. We have the money budgeted. It just didn't get a chance to get onto this accounts payable run for your approval. So I was going to ask if you guys would at least approve that on the 12/20 meeting, unless you're comfortable with approving it today.
I'll make a motion to approve it today.
Support.
Discussion.
Discussion?
Is this budget in the 2019 or the 2020?
2019.
Is this part of the equipment line item?
It's part of their equipment line item, correct?
Fine.
All right, Mr. Guzek, you're just saying that you saw it in there?
No, I believe him. I
Okay.
mean,
It's
you know,
in there.
It's in there.
It's in there.
Okay, all right. It sounds like we have a motion second. Any further discussion, or? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Lemata?
Thank you very much. Bob, buy some clothes.
No problem. Do you have anything else, Mr.?
I have one other thing.
Okay.
Because of the transition of Grand Blanc Parks and Rec Commission, and while we're working through this, our first quarter rent payment that we generate is $2,858.75. We get the request usually in December, and then we submit it so that they get it the first of the year. And then it also includes our first quarter installment to Parks and Rec of $45,000. We generally, this is the money that they use to operate starting in January, and we just got this last week, and it was, I wasn't sure whether we move this forward, we don't move it forward. Now, on the one hand, if we go ahead and authorize it, you know, even the transition, if we're going to not be running that building, we're pulling them out, it's probably not going to happen the first 30 days. We're going to have to prorate this thing after, and the $45,000 for that first quarter of the year contribution amount that we do, again, for any type of dissolution of the commission or however we break it up, the money would have to come back to the township, so it would have to be part of our agreement moving forward. But I don't know if the board wanted me to submit those while there was a question mark regarding Parks and Recreation, or if how you wanted to handle it, so I wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to think about that.
Mr. Mansour?
So I have a question about that. How does this amount of money for the rent and the installment, how does that interact with the MOU that apparently is difficult or hard for the city to sign off on?
What we have in the MOU is any amount of money, very similar to what the Fire Commission has gone through, is that once we begin this transition, we're going to begin a financial review and an audit. And so what it will do is it will also make an accounting of the money that's paid in and when it's paid, and then that money would be distributed according to the formula as it went in. And so I don't necessarily think that if we make our contribution at this point in time, it's going to show up on their books. It's going to be used at least in the first 30 days of operations. And so we'll be able to, that money will be accounted for and will be eligible to be returned to us or to the city, whoever pays it in. And I think it's important to note that, I mean, they're still up and running, they still have obligations, and they still have programming obligations, and so I think that we should probably continue our obligations, knowing though that if we're successful with this MOU, that there'll be sort of a retracing of steps as far as the money goes.
Mr. Thomas?
Through you to Superintendent Limina. No matter what, we are pulling bicentennial out of the preview of the city, and we are doing our own programs, everything, no matter what. So for the first quarter, should we pay, no matter what, we're pulling out. So I don't think we should pay the whole quarter, do you? What are your suggestions?
I would pay it because I will like this.
The whole quarter?
Yeah, I will, and here's why. Much like we did with the fire department, the dissolution, of course, new millage money's coming in and our normal contribution, we started to send it to the fire department. We figured out, like when we did that, was 115 days into the year. We took 115 days worth of what it would have been. The city did the same thing. And we would do this the same thing. If it went 2 weeks into the year, they're going to get 14 days and it's going to be prorated. So if we went 30 days by the time we cleaned up, you know, got out of the rent deal, made physical changes and moved people, then that $45,000 contribution means that we've got $30,000 coming back out of the assets of the Parks and Rec Commission. And that's exactly what we did with the fire when we split it up.
Yeah, that's what I'm
How long did it take?
Mr. Atkins?
It's been a year.
No question.
I think, you know, one of the things we talked about, you know, showing the city that with regard to this, you know, whether it's 60,000 or 30,000 that David asked for, you know, for our operating costs. You know, we've worked it out with the fire. We have a memorandum of understanding there, and I don't know, the audit is complete, I think, or nearly with regard to fire.
It's in the works.
It's in process, so something similar will happen with this, with the Parks and Rec. But I think to show them that, you know, we're holding steady with what we've originally offered. I'd say we move forward with it and trust that the audit will divide the assets fairly. Mr. Massey?
Question to you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
when you suggest that we move forward with it, do you mean today or on the 20th?
Well, well, that's up to the board if we care to make a motion today or do it on the 20th.
I've got one more question
Mr. Thomas?
before we make a motion. Superintendent Lemata, do you know if the city's paid their first quarter?
I have no idea whether they paid it, but they've been paying all along. We're still been operating under the same agreement, until that MOU comes through. I have no reason to believe that they didn't. I haven't heard anything that they had started withhold funds, and since they've been full steam ahead, and again, they got that weird calendar year that ends on May 31st, so I don't know if they pay theirs like we do on each quarter. Just not privy to that information.
I can't remember.
So
Mr. Mansur?
So I have I guess kind of a similar question, and because we've talked about how this sum is in some way comparable to the fire department, as I understand it, I mean, we moved into the new fire department months ago, and we still haven't signed off with the city on the division of assets. We've had arguments over individual line items and the rest of that. Is there something that makes us believe that this issue is going to be handled any differently?
Mr. Laddie?
I would think that there's nothing that would make you believe it would be different.
So we're talking about our contribution going one quarter to the next possibly.
Getting held up for a year.
Yeah.
And then another.
Yeah, and then another.
Well,
Is there a way that we could tie this contribution to their signature on the MOU?
Okay. I have a suggestion for you, because I already have to reach out to Walt. I already have to give you feedback. Why don't I present this issue to them? Not necessarily tied, but what are they going to do?
Yeah.
And if we're meeting it, but that means that we need to change the agenda for the 20th to include any other business or this particular portion of business. Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, to Trustee Al, I sort of disagree with your concern, and I'll tell you why. And let me take a deep dive here. I'm not disagreeing with your thinking, but I'm disagreeing with what I anticipate that your thinking is going to bring about. Okay? Now, and I would like for everybody to think of it this way. We have had experiences dealing with the city. Okay? And I think the attorney alluded to this, it may have been the superintendent alluded to this. What make us think they're going to do anything differently than they have done in the past? So, I would like to go on record as saying, speaking the truth, the more you muddy the water, the more it's going to prolong the agony. I can assure you that. Now, if the board don't mind prolonging the agony, the decision is accepted. But if you think you're going to get some concrete answer back before the attorney comes back, I see that dead in the water. It's been my experience. I had it in the fire department, so I don't see anything different.
I am so tired of being held hostage. I am just so done. We were supposed to end this back this summer, then it was November, now it's the first quarter, now it's more gameplay. Mr.
Lemata?
The other consideration for the board is that this is probably the lowest revenue time of the year for the Parks and Rec folks. And if we withhold the $45,000, we may be putting them, even if for them to operate for 30 days while we work through the MOU, we may be putting them into a situation that shorts them of operating funds and being able to carry on, even just to continue to do the normal registrations and the things that they're doing currently.
Ms. Lane?
I will make a motion that we make our first quarter payment for the operation of the Parks and Recreation.
Support.
Okay. So motion and support. Any more discussion? Mr. Mansur?
I'll just want to make one more comment here. So we are gonna go ahead with a payment, and I do understand, you know, the continuing operating cost. But understand that one of the 3 reasons that we are in this position where we are working to disengage our park from the Parks and Rec is because of some issues with the payments of their bills, lack of coverage of payment of insurance, questionable other payments. So if we make this, we just got to know going in that there's nothing that I've seen that the behavior of that organization has changed, and so we're really putting some of this at some level of risk.
Yep.
So let's just go in with our eyes open if that's the consensus of this group.
Doing it.
Ms. Lane?
We were dealing all this week, or all this year, with a past history with a previous director. I am confident that at least from the direction I've seen from the current director, that some of your concerns should be alleviated. But I also don't want to have anything happen to discontinue a wonderful Parks and Rec program.
Mr. Thomas?
The current director works at the pleasure of the Parks Commission. That's been the same Parks Commission that led us down to this path. She works at the pleasure of them. She doesn't work for us. She works at the pleasure of the commission.
Just to try and, I prefer consensus votes on things, as you know, but Mr. Mansour, just to follow up on your concern, and I think, you know, they're valid concerns, but what could Mr. Laddie do as he meets with Mr. Griffin to address those concerns with this first quarter payment? Anything you'd suggest?
Yeah, I don't have anything specific, and just so everyone knows, I'm not saying that this is a deal breaker, but I just think that we ought to all go in with our eyes open, that there's no reason that I would expect that they would treat this first quarter with any additional respect or diligence than it's been treated, our contributions have been treating in the past.
Well, one of the things that I'm sorry, Mr. Guzak?
I was just going to ask Mr. Ladd if there's any way we can condition part of this money. We probably can't, but is there any way we conditioned it that we would have a chance to look at it or whatever? Or is that, since they're a separate operation, I know it's probably not feasible, but I need to ask it.
Yeah, I would, well, again, I understand exactly the feelings and I think you're correctly analyzing how we got here and where we're moving forward. And Earl, to answer your question, or Treasurer Guzak, I don't think that that's necessarily feasible at this time. And it's the situation we find ourselves in my opinion.
Well, one of the things that we talked about, Mr. Laddie, I believe, with the group was that with the school and the city, was that, you know, upon the acceptance of the MOU and moving operations here to the township, that we would conduct an audit. I think we mentioned that earlier this evening. So I mean that this money will, you know, show up on that radar.
It's in the MOU, and there'll be, and again, there will be. Let's say that magically this occurred on January 1st. We now have permission to do all the programming. We're looking at moving everything into this building and saving as much money as we can. There's still going to be accounts receivable. There'll still be invoices that they receive, probably for the first quarter. I mean, the first quarter is conceivable that there's going to be financial activity there, even if we got it January 1st.
We did send, I don't know, is it in the MOU, Mr. Laddie, or did we send separate correspondence asking that there not be any hiring, raises, or major expenditures or something of that nature?
No, I think we for sure sent that additionally, but I also think that it's in the MOU.
Okay. So we have that we've already requested. I thought it was in the MOU as well.
Yeah, I saw it in the
Yeah.
Is it? Okay,
yes.
so we have that
Yes.
in the agreement as well. But well, any further discussion? Otherwise, we'll vote on Ms. Lane's motion to go ahead and pay the first quarter amount. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Limita, was there anything else that we're going to need to cover on the 20th that, or we can keep it with now, we can just basically pay the bills on the 20th?
The three lingering items that just cropped up, so if it's just a accounts payable meeting, we just need to know that there's going to be a quorum there to pay the bills.
Will there be 4 individuals? What time did we say on?
I have one question. I
I'm
have
sorry.
one
Okay.
activity to bring up.
That you need on the agenda?
I think so. Mr. Laddie can recommend otherwise, but today, Grand Blanc Estates turned in their petitions to have their roads redone. All of the signatures have been verified. It's gone to the assessing department to determine whether or not they have enough road frontage. And once we make that determination, I would bring it to the board and say, can we set a public hearing in order to start moving forward on this? And it requires an ad in the paper and notification to the residents. And if you want to make it the end of January, then, I mean, there's timing with ads and notices to the people. And that's why
Mr. Laddie?
I would think, and this is interesting, but I believe that if all that material is ready to go for our first meeting in January, we can go ahead. We don't need to have a resolution to schedule a public hearing. We could schedule a public hearing without having that first resolution.
you and I can.
Well, yeah, we can request it to be on the agenda from the supervisor and superintendent's office. And if everything's in place, then we could send out notices for it. It won't change the function of the township board at all.
All right.
So.
Yeah, let's just wait then. So it sounds like there's nothing else for the 20th.
No.
And what we have for, what time did we say on the?
10 o'clock.
Will we be able to have 4 board members there?
I will be here.
It's a Friday, right?
I'll be here.
Lonnie, you'll be here. Mr. Atkins?
I will, but I had one
Mr. Thomas?
one question as well.
You be here, Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Okay, we'll have 4. Okay, Mr. Atkins?
One thing, I don't know if it will be for the 20th, but to Clerk Lane, at what point will we adopt the meeting schedule for 2021?
We've
already
Or
done that.
2020, sorry.
We've done that already.
We have done that?
Yes,
Okay.
in a previous meeting.
All right. That's me.
Okay, so we don't need to vote on anything with regard to that meeting, do we? Or, let's see.
No, it's already going to be
Okay.
posted.
Okay.
So we don't need to vote. We're going to have a special meeting on the 20th.
Executive session.
Okay, we've got the strategic planning. I'm getting dates. We can talk about that later. The board reports, Mr. Mansour, anything planning?
Nothing to report. I unfortunately had to miss the last Planning Commission meeting, so I don't have much to report there, although I do know that the Master Plan Steering Committee met and that they're working on additional sections. I think we've looked at 4 different sections to the master plan so far, and I know that we've also received at least last week, on whatever was the first Tuesday, we had nearly 700 responses to the survey, so that's coming along.
How many were they hoping for or targeting?
You know, yeah, we have a statistically significant response, so that's fine. So now it's just kind of gravy. So other than that, I don't have anything more to report. Thank you.
Mr. Atkins, anything with your zoning board?
Nothing to report out.
Mr. Guzak, anything?
No, nothing at this point.
Slam?
I'm going to be sending up, no, I can't send up firecrackers. I'll have
Okay.
to just put up lights
Okay.
that we're making a lot of changes over the
Okay.
first part of this year
Okay.
on boundaries and everything.
Just a couple of quick things. I know we've been here a while and we were here late Tuesday, but just real quick, I actually met with the road commission and their engineers and what have you to talk about preliminarily what roads they see in the township that next year would be a priority. As the public may not know, the county establishes a Paiser rating for every road in the township, or in the county really. And what we did is we looked at a map of what roads would qualify maybe for some funding. We have one perk we have this year is that Consumers Energy, due to a lot of construction activity in the area, is the Road Commission is working with them to actually pay to replace or to fix a number of roads that they're using because of their heavy trucks. So, for example, the section of Hill Road between the roundabout on Belsey and Vassar Road is an area that is either has been heavily traveled or will be by consumers, and actually the Pager rating, I believe, has dropped one level on that road, so they will be picking up the cost there, or at least a portion of it. And there's a number of other roads in the township that are going to qualify for some additional funds that Consumers is willing to cover the cost for. We also have an area that one of the roads is going to be able to be funded with our federal grant, that we refer to it as CDBG funds, that we're going to be able to use that money to pave Howe Road. Last year we paved, or this year we paved Wakefield Road. Next year we're going to be able to pave Howe, which will be real nice, because if we're able to pave that section of Linden Road that I just, or not Linden, of Hill Road that I just mentioned, we're going to be able to have both Wakefield, Howe, and Hill Road, which are all right there. That whole area will have new asphalt. We're looking at a number of other areas, gravel on Halsey Road. We're looking at actually with the roundabout that we're hoping will get installed next summer at Cook and Dort. We're hoping that we can get Consumers to pay for a portion of Cook Road between Embury and the roundabout, and the township and the county paying for doing the portion between the roundabout and Fenton Road, which is in horrible shape. The section between Embury and Holly Road needs a complete rebuild, and so we're looking at the future for that. The shoulders there are very narrow due to being repaved so many times. But there's a number of other roads that we're looking at, and I'll be asking our road committee to meet and talk about what we've covered, and then bringing it to the board. But it looks like we're going to have a outstanding year in terms of number of roads that are going to be paved. Even the road commission commented that there's going to be a lot of activity in the township. If you aren't aware that the stoplight or the signal light that we've been asking for a couple of years, and they actually we started into the project with a traffic study this past year, and we also came up with half the funds for putting a light at Embury and Grand Blanc Road. You'll be pleased to know that we actually had the power installed to that area earlier in the week, and today the actual signal lights were installed. I spoke with Mr. Pavandi, the director of the Road Commission, this evening, and they will be making those flashing lights fairly soon. They'll stay as flashing lights for maybe approximately 2 weeks, just to let everybody in the area know that there's a light there, and then they will make them active. And our hope is that they work with the signal at Dort Highway and Grand Blanc, so that I'm sure they've thought of that, so that it's coordinated. I know it's been a very dangerous intersection. Channel 12 and other media have been interested in it, but it really is a dangerous situation. I don't know what the stats are for accidents there. They asked me, but they were going to contact the Road Commission. But if there hasn't been any major accidents there's one waiting to happen with people trying to pull out into that traffic. So exciting stuff on the roads here in the township. Mr. Lehman is going to report on a meeting that we had at a very high level with regard to post office and the zip code, which I'll just say that I left the meeting very encouraged, and I hope that my enthusiasm is misplaced, but the meeting that we had, I sure left with a good feeling, and it's something that we've been working on because of both the Tech Village development would have a Holly address right now. The township offices here has a Flint address, and it really causes a lot of confusion when people put it in their GPS. But I'm going to let Mr. Lima talk a bit about how that meeting went. The DDA is not meeting this month. We've accepted the marketing plan. Everybody received a copy of that. The DDA asked that I chair that for the next year, which I'm going to. I also want to thank a number of people for the tree lighting event and all the work that went into it. Sonia Limata from the park, one of our programmers at the Parks and Recreation, and Megan Gilman put the thing together. This is their second year, and just went over phenomenal results. Things were spread out a little bit this year in terms of the activities so that everybody wasn't crowded around under the pavilion. The entire park staff really worked, I think, year-round to make sure that some of the things that we encountered last year with muddy walkways and what have you were taken care of. So I didn't see any mud. It helped that the ground was frozen. And I didn't believe the temperature gauge because it was freezing cold out there. I was amazed with the crowds that braved the cold to be on the horse-drawn carriage rides. But our DPW department, Jeff Sears heading that up, did a phenomenal job getting that ready. Our police, our fire, the parking and the traffic flow worked fabulous with as well as our volunteers with the police. What is it, the police academy? What do we call it? Citizens Police Academy were out, which are a number of volunteers that came out and helped, and we want to thank them. But overall, it went over very well, and I can only see that growing. And we had some signage out there as well that highlighted some of the accomplishments, many of the accomplishments of our various township departments and boards. So, and I know Mr. Mansor and Mr. Atkins worked on that. So I think overall it was a fabulous Saturday last week, and look forward to continued success with that. Mr. Limita?
1 second, can I
Sure.
I also want to just mention that Santa was a big hit, and so was the MC and the top hat.
Oh.
So Supervisor Bennett, thank you for conducting the ceremonies.
Thanks. I'm thinking of requiring all board members next year to dress, for the
Charles Dickens affair,
Christmas.
yeah.
So be prepared. But thank you very much, Mr. Mansor. Mr. Limita?
Sure, I'll be brief. Santa almost got to go for a very exciting ride because as the fire department was dropping him off, they got a fire call.
Major fire call.
So Santa almost had to switch suits. The zip code realignment request that we've been making for a number of years. This year we took a different approach and really did some research on it. In 2016, the U.S. Postal Service gave them a list of things that they had to consider. One of the rubs that they were getting from folks is that they found a way to say no instantly. You sent them a request, they said no and threw it on the pile and sent you a rejection. And he even admitted to that when Scott and I had the meeting with him earlier this week. But it was a very good meeting. We met with the postmaster from the Holly Post Office, the Flint Post Office, and then this Joe Vollmer, who is the manager of the U.S. Postal Service Address Management Systems from the Detroit District. He had to give us kudos because we really took the checklist that they have to consider, and their new directive is that they have to find a way to say yes to make those changes. Well, we took every point on their list that they have to consider, and we provided that answer. He commented that it was the most complete thing he'd ever seen. It made it really hard to say no. They floated a couple of alternatives, which one we rejected out of hand. One we don't believe solves all the issues of customer service that come up with the zip code issue. I too left with a positive feeling. We should have an answer back from them probably by the end of January 2020. It may make, like I said, we made it as hard as we possibly can for them to reject it. They did remind us that if they do reject it this time, it will be 10 years before we can reapply for another realignment. So I think we gave it our best shot.
I want to give kudos to Mr. Limita too. The individuals that we met with were actually kind of blown away that we followed the new guidelines because they weren't even sure that people had seen them yet. We've had a committee made up of Jet Kilmer, who's the president of the Grand Blanc Chamber, Rick Barnett, who's the president of the Chamber, Dave Robertson, and Mr. Lehman and myself have met numerous times over the past several months. And actually it was Mr. Lehman who brought it to our committee that said, hey, we've got to go about this in a different tactic. And Mr. Lehman took it upon himself to actually draft the letter, and had to be from the supervisor, but I appreciate the letter, and they were blown away with our request, so I'm looking forward to the results. Anything else, Mr. Lemina?
That's all I got.
Mr. Laddie?
No, sir.
Okay.
So moved that we adjourn, and to everybody here and who might watch it or lives or resides in the township, a very safe and happy Merry Christmas and New Year.
I concur.
Support.
Happy Festivus.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Yes, sir, it was.
Yeah, man.
Nice 2 hours.